Good evening. Thank you for having us tonight. As mentioned, today we're excited to present the next comprehensive plan. Give me a minute to just get up. Okay. So this evening we are going to do an overview of the comprehensive planning process so you know what went into it. The committee that helped develop this is certainly a large undertaking by a large number of people. The process, we're going to talk about updates to the mission and vision, or proposed updates to the mission and vision, which is part of the process, goals and action planning, and then we'll talk about some of the required state reports that include Chapter 4 reporting, induction planning, professional development, and then we'll wrap up with a summary. So let's start off briefly by just talking about what the comprehensive plan is. The comprehensive plan is a 3-year plan that focuses on continuous school improvement. This is a requirement of the state. It needs to be done every 3 years, and we need to pull together a stakeholder team, make updates, and then submit the plan to the state. We are currently working under our current comprehensive plan, which is set to expire at the end of this year. So our comprehensive plan is due this August. There are several components of the comprehensive plan, which include, the first step is looking at the district mission and educational values, and using that to really platform and start the process to make sure that the plans that you're doing are all connected back to that district mission, vision, and educational values. There's also a process where we conduct a needs assessment to, again, use data to make sure that our next steps are going to be rooted in data. We then go through a process of goal setting and action planning, and then we discuss how the professional development is going to be used to support that. There's also some required state reports, as I mentioned. We are going to do a brief overview of these tonight, but we're not going to go into extensive detail, but this information will also be available for review. So as I mentioned, we start with a committee process. It's really important that the comprehensive plan is a reflection of our community. So we worked really hard in the beginning of the year. We started this process in the summer and started the planning process in the summer. And then we really worked to make sure that we had a committee that was reflective of our entire community. So we developed 3 committees. The first is the steering committee, who is largely responsible for meeting throughout the year and directly responsible for developing the plan. There are about 42 members who participated on the steering committee. We also had a feedback and review committee. This committee consisted of members who were responsible for reviewing the draft plans and adding some feedback and some thoughts in addition to what was already created, so that they weren't necessarily meeting throughout the year, but certainly they're an available and important part of the process to give us feedback throughout it. And we had 5 members there. And then finally, we have a professional development committee. We call it the Professional Development Task Force. This was actually established, I believe, 3 years ago when I first joined the district. And the Professional Development Task Force is set to meet 3 times a year. And the purpose of that task force is to help develop and drive the professional development needs of the district for all of our staff. So as part of the comprehensive plan, we did take a little bit of a different approach this year in really making sure that that professional development task force was looking at the needs throughout the district, but then directly tied to the comprehensive plan as well. And we have about 52 members within that committee. So how were these committee members selected? We have staff. We communicated with our staff, both through our association and through our Act 93 team, to make sure that we had staff that was reflective across the board of all of our schools, different roles and responsibilities within our schools, making sure that we had administrators that reflected elementary, middle, and high school. But we also reached out to our parents, guardians, and community. In September 2021, we sent out an interest form to stakeholders, so everyone within the community was invited to participate. We posted this on the website. We had weekly updates in an email and an updated video, and we also had social media posts. And ultimately, we're really excited that everyone who asked to be part of this process, we were able to find a place for them within one of those 3 committees. We asked our community to rank which committee they preferred to be on, and we were able to give everybody their first choice of committee. So we really had a really nice perspective across the board. In addition, we also had a presentation with the Springford Chamber of Commerce, and this was really a great opportunity to be able to share a little bit throughout the community of what we're currently doing, but also give some local businesses the opportunity to give feedback as well. We handed them a form at the end, and they could either elect to participate on one of the committees or can give us just some feedback to consider. So we really tried to expand our reach and make sure that we were really making sure that our comprehensive plan was reflective of the entire community. So the process, as I mentioned, we started in the summer and we started to really think about, we knew the comprehensive planning was coming up for renewal. And it was really important for us, especially in the fact that, in the light that you have new leadership in the district with Bob, myself, and Dr. G being relatively new. We wanted to make sure that we use this opportunity to really plan and look at how the comprehensive plan is 3 years within a much bigger picture of Springford. So we wanted to make sure we took our time with it and really looked at a way to use this to drive our district. So the first thing we did was develop a plan, a Gantt chart, so to speak, of really which projects needed to be done, what's the time frame for that to be done, to make sure that we hit all of our targets. We then worked with our committee to reflect on that mission and vision and the educational values, which actually took a little bit more conversations than we originally thought going into it, to be honest with you. We conducted a needs assessment, we prioritized those results, and then we developed plans for improvement and identified resources and professional development. And that brings us to the bullet point here where we're sharing and communicating our plan. And then we will work with, in the summer, our building levels to now say, well, now what? Once we have the district plan in place, it's now time to actualize that plan. It's time to look at what that means for each building and working with the building administration to build their building level plans for next year that complement that. And of course, along the way, we're going to reflect and evaluate. As much as we're going to plan now for the next 3 years, we know that it's just that. It's a plan. It's a direction we think we should be going into, but we're going to have to reflect and evaluate and tweak as we go along. So as I mentioned, the committee met several times throughout the year, the steering committee. We first created that project management plan just to make sure that we stayed on task and made sure that we stayed on our timeline. The comprehensive plan is coming up to be due in August, and we are ahead of the timeline for that. So making sure that we had enough time to be able to share that. We had 6 meetings, one of which was spent giving feedback on the plans as we went along. And I also want to mention too that within each of these meetings, in between those meetings was a significant amount of work that was done, preparing plans, drafting plans, sending it to the committee to get feedback along the way. But you can see here that we started with meeting 1 really discussing the plan, discussing the purpose, the role of the committee, and then talking about the mission and vision. We spent a lot of time on the mission and vision. I'll be honest, going into the process, we thought, okay, that's a checkbox. We're just gonna check it and move on. But the committee really took the mission and vision to heart. They did a great job of really looking at it and thinking about what it means in Springford and ways that we can maybe tweak that to be a little bit more user-friendly. So then we worked through the mission and vision quite a bit, and then we got to the needs assessment, which helped us really determine what is our data telling us? What do we need to do to move forward, and how can we prioritize those areas? So we did review a lot of data, including, these are just a kind of a snapshot of some of the data that we did review, including the Future Ready PA Index, graduation rates, attendance rates, discipline, assessment data through platforms such as eMetrics. We looked at 21st century teaching and learning, PVAS, which is our value-added growth data. We looked at special education data and also our technology infrastructure to make sure that our technology infrastructure is supporting what we want to do instructionally. So moving into then the mission and vision, I have here our current mission and vision. If I'm not mistaken, I believe this mission and vision have been in place in the district for about 10 years. So it's definitely something that we've been working under for quite a while. So one of the first questions we started with our committee, and to keep in mind that committee is a committee of 42 people. Dr. G and I are presenting today, but we're really presenting on behalf of that committee and the work that went into that. There was so much heart, so much dedication to Springford throughout that committee. It was really inspiring to hear the different thoughts and hear the different perspectives. And to me, it was great that our community, our teachers felt comfortable speaking up and saying, you know, we've even had this mission and vision for 10 years, but we can do better. So you can see here, these are some of the quotes through the conversations that occurred around the mission and vision and why we really needed to change. Some of the thoughts was that the one I heard a lot was that it seems a little bit there's a lot of industry jargon, words that maybe educators use or phrases we use. There was some that it felt that it seemed to lack heart, and it wasn't sure what a term like educationally relevant meant. There was some comments about not feeling like it was inspirational or motivational, that it was more of just a statement. And I really like the last one. As we reflected who we are as Springford, it kept coming up that we're really a forward-thinking district, but nowhere in our mission or vision does it really portray that. So we wanted to really look at those areas. So our goal going into the revisions were to make sure that we reduce some of that jargon, increase the clarity so that anybody can read it and understand what our intent is, to more accurately represent really what's important to us in Springford, and to be student-centered. So our proposed mission, is there any way you can move that box? Thank you. So our proposed mission is Springford Area School District cultivates academic excellence, embraces inclusivity, fosters wellness, and purposefully integrates technology and innovation. We've also left the original mission statement as well. We wanted, again, we went through many, many versions of this and editing it. Our proposed vision statement is that Springford Area School District is committed to empowering students to follow individual and diverse educational pathways, preparing them for success in local and global communities. So again, really trying to look at the reduction of jargon, increase clarity, more accurately represent Springford, and make sure that was student-centered. So through these revisions, we feel that we have met these goals. And my hope with this presentation is to go through everything, and if you have questions or you want to go back to it, we can go back to it afterwards as well. The educational values were done a little bit differently in this version of the state template. So I'm not going to show you a comparison between last year's, just because we're not comparing apples and apples together here. So they're a little bit different. So the goal of the educational value was to identify what the expectations were for each of these stakeholder groups and how these stakeholder groups were going to contribute to meeting the mission. So we spent a lot of time on that mission and vision, and then we went through each of these 5 categories to talk about how would this stakeholder contribute to us meeting those mission and vision. So we started with our educational values for students. Again, so the question we asked was, how are students going to contribute towards meeting the district mission and vision? I'm not going to read all of these to you. After this presentation, we are going to post this on the district website as well, so it could be on a public review as well. But what we tried to do with these educational values is think about who our students are and what we want our students to get from it and how they're going to contribute. So you'll see here, the first one is developing that intrinsic motivation, really making sure that students are doing things because they're motivated, they're connected to what they're learning, and it's really them having an active role within their own education. The next set of educational values, we're looking at staff. Again, going back to the question, how are staff going to contribute to meeting the district mission and vision? So here, you're looking again at those staff members, all of our staff members, being positive role models for our students and demonstrating that dedication, passion, and empathy, making sure that our staff members support student strengths in the classroom and also beyond the classroom. Again, recognizing that it's about the entire school experience for our students. Creating a supportive classroom that encourages student growth. Making sure that staff members lead students to develop their own perspectives and understandings, not to direct, lead, or influence their perspectives. And that statement was taken directly from some of the administrative regulations we've currently worked on with regards to current events as well. Again, making sure that our role as a teacher is to help students find resources, find reliable resources, and develop their own perspective, not to tell them what to think or how to think, but how to develop that on their own. And to also help ensure that students can engage in the world around them as well. We then went to administration. Again, how is the administration contributing to the overall district mission and vision. And again, it's about creating opportunities for staff to develop so that they can meet the district values and priorities. Our role as administrator is to help everyone be successful, help our teachers be successful, help our students be successful, and then get out of the way and let them do it. So you'll see that listed here too. We also listed information about transparency. This is something that's been really important to us. And if you've attended the curriculum meetings, you've heard us talk about transparency quite a bit in making sure that we're transparent and clear with what we're doing so that we are meeting our community needs, we're meeting our student needs, so that we can meet all of our learners as well. And then the final two were related to parents and guardians and the community. Again, looking at, as a district, we only have a limited power to how we might influence our community and our parents. But what we want to enforce is that we are here because we appreciate the partnership with our families. We appreciate and value the partnership with our community members. And we see Springford as just that, a partnership throughout the district. And that's really important to us. So again, I know I went through these a little bit quickly, but they will be posted so that you can read them in more detail. So throughout that process, I mentioned we started with our mission and vision, educational values. Now we have a really good idea as to where we're going. Now is the, well, so what, now what? We spent some time digging through the data. I mentioned in the one of the previous slides that we focused on a large data set to make sure that we understand what is the data telling us. And through that needs assessment, we identified three main goals. The first is math, the second is a system of interventions, and the third is special education and inclusive practices. And in just a minute, I'm going to explain what the system of interventions mean. So what we identified with math is that overall, we know that we're a high-performing district. We are doing well, but as you start to peel back some of that academic data, we're starting to see a little bit of stagnating with our math scores. We did find that this is one of the areas of need that some of our scores are plateauing, in some instances they're dipping, and we have some room to grow in this. We looked at both achievement data and growth data, and we also looked at disaggregating that to see, again, what is this data telling us? So what we did find through the PA Ready Index, the Future Ready PA Index, there is a goal, a statewide target of 71% proficient, and we haven't hit that yet for 6 of our buildings. So we're working towards that, we're making progress. But again, this is something that we've seen an area of weakness that we can grow in. So we've identified math as one of our areas to focus on. Also within our curriculum review, math is coming up for review, so it dovetails nicely with some of the curriculum work that we're finding that we need to do. So we set 3 math goals. So our overall focus is math. Within math, we have 3 goals. One goal is to ensure that all of our buildings are either meeting or exceeding the state target for mathematics. The second is to ensure that all curriculum documents are standards aligned, and the eligible content is taught within the curriculum at the appropriate time. And the third is using that benchmark data to establish a system of intervention for students. So what does this really mean? Step 1 is looking at using the data purposefully to make sure our students are not only achieving, but growing. So just to be clear, we know that it's not all about test scores. This particular slide might not say that, but we know it's not all about test scores. But what we need to do is use the data that's available to us to see what is it telling us, what story is it telling us. And what our data is telling us is that we have some room to grow in teaching and learning in math. And so what we want to do is spend some time focusing on that, making sure, number 1, our curriculum is aligned, it's updated, it's clear, we've unpacked standards, and we truly know at a deep level what those state expectations are. Number 2, once we're assuring that we have a clear curriculum, when students aren't meeting the expectations, we want to make sure there's a clear system for providing instructional interventions in math so that students can get clear interventions as early as possible so that they can stay on track. And then finally, again, that's where that system of intervention comes into play. So it's looking at the data, it's using all of our assessment data, it's ensuring we have curriculum that's aligned and updated, And it's using, again, that benchmark data within a system to ensure students are getting interventions as needed. So how will this all be achieved? Within each of the buildings, we're going to be working on ensuring that there's time for teachers at each of the grade level and content areas to meet as teams and review that data and understand the data. Unfortunately, sometimes data review occurs in pockets when the data becomes available, and then we get busy with everything else, and we don't always go back to it. So what we want to make sure that we're doing is establishing clear protocols, data protocols, to consistently come back to the data and see what it's telling us. And I'm not referring to just PSSA data. We need to look at the teacher assessments. We need to look at our benchmark data. And is our system of assessments, system of data, what is that telling us about the student needs? So really using all of that to help make decisions. Students who are not meeting the grade level expectations would then become that primary focus to make sure, again, all students are growing. So we need to look at that data from two lenses. Students who might be struggling to meet grade level expectations, and then students who are not growing at the rate we would like to see them grow. Whether or not that is a student who's performing really well, we still want to see growth for them. So it's looking at all students and how we are using that data protocol intentionally and purposefully to analyze, provide systems of intervention, and support students with a core curriculum that's solid. We also identified instructional strategies. We want to really focus on doing a few instructional strategies that we know are really high-powered yielding strategies, do them really well. Some of the ones we've already identified are using visual representations, the use of manipulatives, problem solving in number, sense, and fluency, really making sure that our teachers receive professional development and can do these strategies really well and feel very comfortable in those very targeted instructional strategies first, so that all students are moving through the math curriculum with that body of knowledge. So our anticipated outcomes. Again, this whole plan will be posted for you. I'm not going to read everything up here, but ultimately what we want to see is that our building administrators, district office, our teachers, that we're all becoming more comfortable with using data and using data to then go through a protocol and understand what student needs are, and being able to intentionally provide high yield instructional practices and interventions to help support students. That's what pretty much all of this says. So goal 2, we'll move on to the system of interventions. So goal 1 was math goal, and within our math goal, we had 3 sub goals. Our second priority is a system of intervention. This, you heard me mention that a little bit with regard to math. This system of intervention is not limited just to math. This is looking at continuous improvement across the curriculum and making sure that students have access to effective interventions as needed, and making sure that that's documented and consistently used across our buildings. Now, this isn't to say that we don't already do pieces of this, but what we're trying to do is make sure there's a coordinated effort, that it's done consistently across all of our buildings. So our first challenge is looking again at the instructional interventions and system of interventions to ensure that that is in place and consistently used. So our first goal is to establish and document a district-wide multi-tiered system of support that includes reading, math, and social, emotional, and behavioral interventions. So what this means is making sure there's a documented process that as students exhibit a need, whether or not that is an academic need or a behavioral or social emotional need, that we can have resources, strategies, and a way to measure that and monitor that along the way to ensure that students are getting those supports as early as possible. As students hopefully respond to the interventions, then you back off the interventions. But if you find that students are not responding to the interventions, then you increase the intensity of those interventions so that you can, again, have increasing support for students. And so when we talk about the system of intervention, that's where we're looking for, something that's documented and clearly processed across the district. And then goal 2 is to use disaggregated data to identify and close the achievement gap for all students. Now, I want to be really clear with this because the term achievement gap means different things in different buildings. As we refer to it in this presentation, we are referring to the achievement gap as meaning the difference with all students, any student, between where they are and the current grade level expectations. So if we're seeing that students are not meeting expectations, we're referring to that as an achievement gap. So how can we close that for students to make sure that they are on track? So how will we achieve this? We will be monitoring, we will be using checklists and monitoring tools. Our goal is to develop a checklist and use monitoring tools to identify the elements of expected, what's called tier 1 instruction. I have a few definitions of terms that we would be looking into. PBIS refers to a positive behavioral intervention and support. IST refers to an instructional support team. RTII is response to instruction and intervention, and SAP is our student assistance program. So again, working within teams to develop data teams to make sure that we're consistently looking at data and then knowing which resources and which interventions to put in place as needed. So our anticipated outcomes within each building that we will have that clear and consistently used an audit first, start with an audit of our process. Again, as I mentioned, we already have a lot of great things going on in our buildings, and a lot of these components already exist within our buildings. So we're going to first start by auditing that and see where we are and what's effective. But then we're going to move into creating a process to make sure that that is consistently used. If we see one thing is effective in one of our elementary buildings, well, let's see about adopting it for another building. If we see a gap in that process, then we're going to look for a resource to fill it. And that brings us to our priority 3, which is special education, and I will turn that over to Dr. G.
Thank you. So I'm going to be talking to you about 2 different things. First is the priority number 3 for special education. And then on the following slides, I'm going to blend in and also speak to you about the special education plan, which is also due. It's actually due the end of July, but it is a separate plan compared to the comprehensive plan. So I'm very grateful that we were included, and special education is part of the overall comprehensive plan. If you think about the mission and vision that has been posted, it talks about the necessity for diversity and embracing inclusivity. So the challenge for special education has been, in January of 2020, we were cited as needing growth in the area of least restrictive environment. And that basically means that students who are in special education receiving programming, we weren't meeting the goal in the area of least restricted environment for specific learning disability. And that's getting a little granular, but that's the specific area where we needed to grow. In a district that has almost 1,400 students in special education, 42% of them are in the category of students who have been identified as specific learning disability. So we were tasked to build an action plan to increase our students who are identified as specific learning disability being educated in the general education setting more. Right now, we fell below the state average, and we have. So having that goal in mind, comprehensively K-12, we're looking to increase that score. The challenge under this plan has been an identified area of need. And we, by comparison to the state, we still fall below students who receive instruction in general ed. Therefore, our priority statement will be, we will provide a district level continuum of services that are clearly articulated district-wide when determining special education services and support. We will also identify barriers to inclusive opportunities for students with disabilities and determine pathways for success in the general education setting. That's a very broad and overarching goal for our comprehensive plan, and it does get more focused when I get into some of the goals within the special education plan in a few slides from now. So the goal will be to increase the percentage of students with special needs receiving supports and services in the general education setting through consideration of the least restrictive environment. Our special education teachers do that now when we have IEP meetings. It's always supposed to be the first consideration when you're at the table discussing how we're going to implement services. General education should always be the first placement. How will we achieve this goal? So we're going to assess current practices and align them with evidence-based strategies to increase inclusive practices. We do that now, but we do also need to improve and be more consistent, as Dr. Murray was saying earlier, K-12. We're also going to have building teams review PTAN supplementary aids and services, the consideration toolkit on least restricted environment. And with that, the IEP teams will be utilizing this toolkit during meetings to determine how and what types of services we can provide to students in general education before we determine that we need more support outside of the general education classroom. Some of the anticipated outcomes, are to differentiate between inclusion, inclusive school environments, and the least restrictive environment as contemplated in the Individuals with Disabilities Act. We will also identify characteristics of an inclusive school environment, and we will determine the structures that exist in a school which effectively promotes inclusionary practices. Okay, so I'm going to deviate a little bit, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the special education plan. Our district special education plan was originally due in May of 2021, but because of COVID, we were given some credence and the timeline was extended. So it is now due at the end of July 2022. Just like comprehensive planning, the special education plan is more of a compliance report that's due every 3 years. So when you view it online, as you will, the comprehensive plan, what you will see is a lot of data with respect to classrooms, teachers, compliance issues, how many students we have in special ed. I'll go through some of those categories in a slide or two. So we have to submit it every 3 years, and it's required by PDE, according to PA law. Did I skip one? Okay. Oh, let me go back. Sorry about that. Okay, so here's our district profile. You can see that it's 2021. If you take a look at the left-hand side, that is our district. Our LEA has roughly, or did during that school year, we're always a year behind, almost 8,000 students. 1,400 of them, 1,492, are students who receive special ed programming. So we're at about 18.9% comparative to the state, which is 18. That ebbs and flows. And I've looked at 5-year trend data. We don't deviate too much between 17 and the high 18 percentages. As I'd stated before, if you look down the different categories, the specific learning disability is the largest category outside of speech and language. So the reason that we felt compelled to make that a comprehensive goal is because that's the pocket of students that we have to do a better concerted effort to providing supports in the general education setting for them. These are the indicators that are monitored in the special ed plan. Just like Dr. Murray was talking about the indicators for the comprehensive plan, these are all the indicators that the state looks at to ensure that we are in compliance with our special education programming. I won't read them all, but you can see it starts with how we identify students, disproportionate, significant disproportionality. All of that is embedded in the plan for review. Some of the goal areas that I wanted to highlight tonight, in addition to the overarching comprehensive goal plan of special education, we also picked out and developed some goal areas. And I did utilize the steering committee's notes from when they met as a steering committee back, I believe it was the summer of last year. Most of these are pre-populated. So all those categories we did not develop. They're already listed. We have to create goals for them. So in the area of autism, a goal would be supporting students in the least restrictive environment, evidence-based practices for students with ASD, means autism spectrum disorder. So we're going to be looking at ways to not only incorporate or increase our least restrictive environment for students with specific learning disability, but we're also going to be looking at students who have autism and how we can meet their needs in general education as well. Positive behavior support. We are going to be looking at instructional practices for behavior management and social emotional behavior intervention. And that falls in line with the goal of the MTSS model that we will be exploring going into the next 3 years with a comprehensive plan. In the area of transition, indicator 13 is compliance. That is for secondary students, and middle school success pathway to graduation, P2G. In the area of literacy, we're going to be exploring and training on multisensory structured reading programs. We do have a number of different reading programs now, but we will be looking into other areas to make sure that we are covering all of the needs of all of our special education students. And we are also exploring evidence-based curriculum for reading and writing for the students who take the alternate assessment. They would be students who take the Pennsylvania Alternatives Assessment in school. Parent training is also another area, a goal area, enhancing family engagement, transition planning, special education parents advisory committee, which some of these are already in place, but we do expand on the goals that are written in the plan. IEP development using data for IEP writing, inclusive practices with respect to the least restrictive environment, and IEP progress reporting for general education teachers. Our special education teachers do know how to progress report. It's important for our general education teachers who have students in their classrooms with IEPs to know what progress monitoring is and be able to look at data with the special education teachers so they can make sound decisions of programming moving forward. And then lastly, we have instructional assistants. We're going to be training them, continue training on behavior management strategies, provide literacy and math strategy training, safety cares, behavioral solutions. And we're also looking into, and we're going to be training some of our assistants who work with specific populations on registered behavior technician training. So again, if you go into the special education plan, the goals are there, and it also describes how often it's going to be occurring. And this is over a 3-year year span. They also have extended that to 2024 to 2027 if we need to do that. Some of these we have already been doing since we've been working off of the special education plan that was due in May of 2021. So some of them have already been in place, and we'll continue them. Okay, with that, I will turn it back over to Dr. Murray, and if you have any questions when we're finished.
All right, so as I mentioned in the beginning, there are several required reports that we're also required to submit as part of the comprehensive plan. And we really use this as an opportunity to, again, being all relatively new to the district, wanting to really unpack this to make sure that we can see some of the areas that we need to grow. So one of the things we did conduct a curriculum audit within the district, and I have to give definitely credit to our curriculum department for working on that. Katie Gardy, Brianna Angelucci, and Jen Reinheimer, looking at all of the curriculum documents that we have throughout the district and determining if they are updated, if they're in need of updating, and the standards and so forth. So we conducted that curriculum audit to find that we do have some areas that we need to grow and improve on as far as ensuring that we have those documents that drive instruction. We do have a district-wide curriculum template, and within the template that we have, we do identify information such as topics, pacing, assessments, the essential questions, the skills, the content knowledge and target standards, instructional resources, common roadblocks, technology, and what we've also done is infuse some social emotional learning. Now, I want to be clear that this is not a social emotional learning curriculum, but rather it's an alignment that indicates where naturally within the curriculum do those social emotional skills appear. So let me give you an example. If you're teaching Romeo and Juliet, there's many instances where you can specifically talk about social emotional connections here. So we're identifying where that naturally occurs within the curriculum. Not all of our curriculum documents, however, are on this template. So we are working through our natural curriculum cycle to ensure that all of them are going to be updated over the next several years to make sure that we do have the most updated curriculum. And again, we then want to make sure that the curriculum is not a document that sits on the shelf and then it's done. It's something that's used. It's used to drive instruction. It's used to make instructional choices. And it's used to help us really understand where students are. And then doing some work with what's called unpacking standards. That's a process we go through where we work with teachers to really make sure they understand exactly what is at the heart of the standard. What is it telling us that we're supposed to be teaching, and doing a comparison to what we're teaching to see if there's an alignment there. The last piece I want to talk about is House Bill 1332. It was known as the Curriculum Transparency Bill. It did not pass. However, we've talked about this in curriculum committee, that we as a department believe that the information coming from that bill is still really important. So what we are doing as a curriculum department is working on this curriculum transparency. What House Bill 1332 was requesting was to have information readily available on the website. So anybody can go and see and look at the curriculum and see, a certain set of information. So as I mentioned, as we're updating our curriculum documents, as we're going through that process of curriculum review, we're going to be working on providing access to the curriculum information so it can be readily on our website, because we do believe that curriculum transparency is important. And so we'll be working on that as well. In addition to the comprehensive plan, the curriculum plan, the special ed plan, you can tell we've been quite busy this year. We also have to update the professional development plan, which includes overall district professional development and induction. Induction is our program for our newest teachers. When teachers come to us from outside of the district, they participate in a 3-year induction plan, which is really a process to help acclimate to the district. Many districts choose to only do a 1-year plan, but within Springford, this is something I can't take credit for. This has been done for many years. We have a 3-year plan, which includes mentors, and it includes all teachers who are new to Springford are required to participate regardless of their years of service. We also have an alternative induction plan available for staff that are in a non-teaching position so that their process through the induction can be meaningful to their role and connected to their role. One thing I do want to point out is our instructional coaches are pivotal in the process of our induction program. They work regularly, daily, with our newest teachers, provided job embedded coaching. So our induction plan, we refer to it as Springford Learning Academy. If you recall, our model that we use, our teaching model within the district, is called Springford Learning. It's the approach that we take within the district to teaching and learning. So we thought it was only fitting for our new teacher academy to be called the Springford Learning Academy. We start with our new teacher induction, which consists of 3 full days, usually in August. And this is kind of the introduction to the district. Our board members have the opportunity to have lunch with them. They have the opportunity to meet with their mentors. And we talk a lot about just the different departments within the building and so forth. Year 1 focuses on your general content knowledge and also your curriculum instruction, making sure that everyone's comfortable with how we in Springford expect instruction to be delivered. This is done through 4 after-school meetings and then 3 coaching cycles with our instructional coaches. As I mentioned, our instructional coaches are pivotal to this process. For every new teacher to us, they meet with them at least in 3 coaching cycles. So what that means is they meet with them to pre-plan a lesson. They then either conduct the lesson in either co-teaching model or by observing, and then they debrief the lesson. And they do that 3 times with our newest teachers. In year 2 with us, that same type of structure occurs. The coaching cycle occurs again 2 to 3 times with each new teacher, and there are 4 after-school meetings. This focus now shifts a little bit more to assessments and how we're using assessments to drive instruction, not just as a measure of learning, but more as a measure for learning. And year 3, we shift to 2 after-school meetings, and our coaches are still involved with their teachers, doing 1 to 2 coaching cycles with them as well. So by the time our teachers graduate from our Spring Forward Learning Academy, they would have had 3 years with our instructional coaching and several before, during, and after coaching cycles with them. So it's quite an intensive process. And finally, this brings us to our professional development plan. The professional development plan was developed by the Professional Development Task Force, and we took all of the needs into consideration as developing this, which includes regular staff surveys, college and career advisory committee. We had the family community surveys, family professional development workshops, feedback, and so forth. So again, a lot of information that's filtered into this. We've also used information from the district literacy plan, which was presented last year as well. One of our biggest challenges with professional development is time. We just don't have a lot of time within our calendar to be able to pull teachers out of the classroom, especially in the last couple of years with COVID and the sub shortage that we're all experiencing. So our goal is really to try and explore various ways that we can get creative with professional development and bring more flexibility with the limited time that our teachers have. It's finding that balance, because we want our teachers to be on the cutting edge. We want them to have that opportunity to grow, but we don't want to overwhelm them with time that they just don't have. So it's really one of the balances that we're constantly trying to manage. We use a variety of professional development approaches, from curriculum-based approaches to technology integration. We're looking at cyber and virtual instruction, the diverse needs of students. These are all the categories of professional development that are highlighted as a need within our professional development plan. So our curriculum department is going to be working to see how do we balance all of these needs throughout the next 3 years and ensure that everybody has what they need. Certainly within the goals of the comprehensive plan, as we talk about math and we talk about a system of intervention in special education, that also comes with a set of professional development that's needed as well. So our comprehensive plan outlines what professional development we feel we're going to need, not only for teachers, but also for administrators as well. So in summary, with the comprehensive plan, when we met the last time with our committee, I asked the committee, let's define success. What does this mean for us? When we're here another 3 years from now, and we're trying to determine, were we successful? What did we achieve? The other thing I challenged the committee to think about is that the comprehensive plan reflects just 3 years in the whole history of Spring Forward. So that's a short amount of time. It might seem long now, but where do we want to be in 10 years, in 15 years? And the first thing that came up is that we still want to be the district where parents want their children to attend and where staff want to work. We think we hit that. We hear great things consistently across the board. So we still want to be that district. So even though we're proposing changes to our mission and vision, that's still where we want to be. We want to have that district-wide curriculum and scope and sequence that drives instruction. We want to see where we're intentionally using data to make decisions, and then there's clear follow-up for how we're going to provide those interventions. We want our teachers to have a better understanding of co-teaching and how they can support students in the general education classroom first. And as we find that those interventions aren't working, then progressively increase with the instructional interventions. And I love this one here too. We want to make it more of the norm that interventions occur so that students are developing that growth mindset, that it's okay to struggle with something, recognize it, and ask for help. And that exists whether or not that's an academic intervention, a behavioral intervention, or social emotional. So the last question I asked is, what do you want the Board of School Directors and our community to know about the comprehensive plan and the comprehensive planning process? So this is directly from our committee. They wanted you to know that this is a district-wide effort. We work together to provide consistency from the beginning to the end. They wanted you to know that this is not just a 3-year plan that's going to disappear. It's a continuum within the entire life of Spring Forward. They wanted you to know that we've identified goals to grow and support students, which are captured throughout the plan. and that this is an attempt to be proactive, not reactive. They feel it's student-focused, and that our key to success is to be flexible, to celebrate the growth that we see, and to plan steps and be proactive along the way. And that it's a process. It's a constant growth process that we may get a year from now and say, that worked, but we need to tweak and move here a little bit. And then finally, that teachers, parents, administrators were all part of this committee, and that our teachers represented a wide range of experience and levels, as well as a variety of buildings. So our final steps, our entire plan, this was just a snapshot. The entire plan will be put on display for 28 days, which is the required amount for Department of Education on the district website. We are hoping to have, excuse me, a motion at the May board meeting to approve and adopt the comprehensive plan. And then at the beginning of June, we plan to submit the plan to the PA Department of Education along with the other required reports, special education, chapter 4 and so forth, so that we will be well ahead of our date of our deadline. And so with that, we will take questions.
I have a couple questions, and one for you, Dr. Murray, first. And this is just a small thing, but about the math goals and the data was dropping. Can you attribute some of that to the last couple of years and having to deal with COVID and a remote learning? Because I've read that other schools have had this issue with a number of topics.
That's a great question. We tried to look at that. Yes, I will say some of that has to do with COVID, but when we tried to look back at our data, and I think we're seeing some of the same information. I think what we need to do is a better job being really purposeful with our curriculum and making sure that our curriculum is clearly articulated and that we are really looking at the continuum of which strategies we're using and why. So yes, I think it's an impact a bit of COVID, but I think that we still have a need regardless of that.
Okay. And then I have a quick question also for Dr. G. When you said that we were falling short in the area of specific learning disabilities, I'm not familiar. There's an awful lot of industrial terminology in what you're talking about that, not being in that business, I don't understand. But I don't understand the difference between specific learning disabilities versus just the general special ed plan, because you put a chart up there that listed a lot of, to me, specific learning disabilities, and I don't know, but that was listed as one of them, so I don't understand what that is exactly versus all the other things that you listed.
Sure, I can explain. So under IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, students are identified as being eligible to receive special education services under a specific category. There's 13. One is not, you're not going to see up there because it is a developmental delay, which once students become school age, that is an early intervention term. All of those other categories are what students fall under when they're identified through an evaluation. So 13% of our students here in the district fall under the category of students having autism and so on. Students, the deaf blindness, we don't have enough students within our district to quantify a percentage at all. So these categories stem out of an evaluation that's conducted by a school psychologist.
So what could you give us an example of what a specific learning disability is?
So a student who was identified as someone that has a specific learning disability may have what you would know or recognize as a term is dyslexic or has dysgraphia. They would be specific disabilities in the area of reading, math, spelling, writing. So all of those fall under a student who's identified as SLD is what we call it.
So it's just a kind of a very small area, like it's not like autism, which affects them
Correct.
broadly, but this is something that maybe just they're having trouble, like you said, they're dyslexic, so it's a breathing issue.
So that's a great question. When you read through, we use the discrepancy model here in the district, and that basically means when it's also embedded in the special education plan. When a student is evaluated by a school psychologist, there is a discrepancy between what their cognition scores accumulate to be compared to what their achievement scores, meaning they can have a score of, their IQ can be in the range of 100 to 110, but their reading achievement scores come in at around 80. Anything that's more than a 15-point discrepancy, 12 to 15 point, is indicative of a student that has a specific learning disability. And really what that means is cognitively, they're capable of achieving at that 100 score level, but they're coming in at 80% or above, 85 on those specific diagnostic and achievement tests, which demonstrate that there is a disability, whether it's in writing, reading, math, or spelling.
Okay, thank you both very much.
Thank you. I actually have a couple questions too also. Thank you. And thank you very much for that. The comprehensive plan, as we know, is required by the state for 3 years, and it's a very involved document, and you made it very simple. What I know was a huge amount of work by a lot of people. But I also know, as you know as well, that this is where this document ends is where the work begins. And so I'll be looking forward to finding the ways in which you are able to evaluate, which I know is part of the plan, the success for it. One of the requirements is that this document be made available to the public for 28 days. Then that lends itself to the idea that anyone who viewed it in our community should be able to provide some sort of input if they had any questions or comments or something. How would they do that?
So that's a great question. We will have information on the district website. There is a tab under, it says Spring Forward, and then there's a comprehensive planning tab. There'll be information there regarding contacting us.
Great, thank you very much. I also want to make sure that we make the connection between the data report that you provided a couple of months ago that dealt with the PSSA and Keystone scores that demonstrated a lot of this. At that time, you weren't really addressing how you were going to deal with it. This is the specifics on how we're going to address those math scores, but also all of the interventions would impact all of the areas, not just the math. So I'm glad we have had this opportunity to hear now, because I feel the other meeting was really meant just to give us that data and kind of left us with okay, what are we going to do from here? So
you're absolutely right. And we tried not to focus this presentation, although there's a lot more data that we looked at. We tried not to focus too much on the data here, having Katie Gardy presented last month. So certainly that data, and I think you're right, it did kind of leave you with well, now what? We see some of our gaps. What do we do now? And this is a perfect follow-up to that purposefully.
Right. Yes. Thank you. Under math, just to be clear, also one of the goals was to have us at or above the state level for the year 2030. To be clear, we're anticipating getting there sooner than 2030. Correct?
Yes. Thank you. And I can look at the way that's written. 2030 is the state goal. So the target is to reach that 2030 goal within the 3 years of this plan. So no, this is not a plan that's supposed to be taking us to 2030, hopefully.
Great. Thank you very much. The other question, and you may not be able to really answer this right now, but a lot of what you're talking about really requires our staff to have a lot of time with the professional development in service days, and working together. That data analysis is so vital, and you touched on that. We collect this data, we look at this information, we have to analyze it, and then we have to take from that, determine what interventions we're going to use, what changes we're going to make, implement them, assess the data, like additional assessments or benchmarks, and then continue this cycle. You're talking about a lot of time. We used to be able to do that by bringing in substitutes so that we could pull together teams of teachers periodically to be able to sit down and do that work, and then they could disperse this information to the other teachers. We really don't have that luxury of having all of that access to subs now, and we are limited. We just did our calendar, on the number of in-service days. And you may not have an answer for this right now, but these must be some of the hurdles that you need to get over. If you thought about how you're going to have to do this differently now in this different educational reality?
You're absolutely right. And that is one of the biggest challenges this time. So I think we accomplished that in a couple of different ways. We look to use our instructional coaches to make sure that that's happening job embedded, and using data teams within the building schedule. But I also think we have to be very purposeful with our use of data. It is very easy to get to drown in data. And so I think we have to be very conscious of where our teachers are, and what time they have to really use and look at data purposefully and start small. We don't need to drown in data to make meaningful impact. So I think it's about being purposeful with it and starting small so our teachers feel success and that they are set up to be successful. If we drown them in data, they're not going to be successful. They're going to be frustrated. We're not going to see growth. So it's a combination of using the time that's built already within there, but also starting small with very purposeful steps first, so that our teachers can see those actionable steps right away and that they can see the results. And then as we build our capacity, this is a long game. As we build our capacity to use data even more in that to that degree, then we're going to start diving into it more. But one of the worst things that can happen with data is that you drown in it, and it's very easy to do. I do it myself quite frequently. It's very easy to do.
Thank you. And just one last thing on this. Could you explain a little bit about how this would look different K to 12? You know, some of the interventions, I think that we can easily see that would impact, like putting in the responsive interventions for math and for reading, even in the elementary age. But when you're talking about specifically improved instruction and interventions at the secondary, like how would this look different for K through 12?
So that's some of the work that we still have to do to really see what time we have, where the students have time within their system, within their schedules. But this is also going to hopefully look different in the next year than 10 years from now. It should look different as well. And what I mean by that is, you know, right now we're going to be a little bit reactive to it. But as we start to get the system of intervention in place, we're going to be intervening at an earlier point in time. So as students get older, hopefully that need for intervention is reduced because we're starting that clear system earlier. So I think that that's going to evolve over the next handful of years. But that's some of the work that we still have to work out. We have in our plan to develop that system. So I don't have those details yet, but that's what we have to figure out. What is it going to look like at the 5-6 building, and how is that different than K to 4?
Thank you. I look forward to hearing more about how these interventions have been effective. So
Sure.
I appreciate that. So thank you very much. Any other comments at the board table?
I have two comments. Number one, with regards to the mission and vision, and the second one due to special education. So with regards to the mission and vision, and I'm looking specifically at slide 12 of 47, where you have the outlined proposed mission statement. I would agree with all the feedback that is outlined on the previous slide in terms of like why there was a need for the change. And I do think that what was drafted is a much more clear, right? It's clear language, and it really expresses like what are those key pillars that we're doing as a district. I recently have gone through a similar activity with regards to drafting missions and visions, and frankly, it's a thankless job that sometimes has you feeling like you're swirling. So I can appreciate this. I feel like there's two parts to a mission. One is what are we doing? And then the second thing is what are we driving towards? What is the outcome that we're seeking? And while I see language here that talks about cultivates academic excellence, embraces inclusivity, fosters wellness, integrates technology and innovation, my question is, so that what? Right? What are we driving towards? So and I'm just going to throw out language here, which is very generic, but is it to enhance student outcomes? Is it to support the diverse needs of our students? Is it to prepare our students for success post-graduation? So while I am by no means a fan of the current district mission and vision that is on slide 10, I do think the one thing that is included in that is not included in the proposed is that so that piece, so that students are fully prepared to positively contribute to their society. So I think it explicitly states what we are driving towards. And I was, I don't need comment, it's not really a question, but maybe just food for thought before bringing it back to the board in May.
Great, thank you. We'll take that into consideration.
The other thing I wanted to direct is to Dr. G, and I think there's a lot to react to here in this slide, and as it relates to special education, I think it's one thing to unpack the data and to read, right, a 47-slide PowerPoint presentation, and it's another for us as board members to really dig in to understand the experience of our parents who have students with special needs. So whether it be attending the special education parent committee, or, again, I'm going to throw out some ideas here, but whether it be observing a special education class. And because I don't know that for as much as I will read about it, like I think it's one thing to read about it, I think it's another one to observe it. And I think as board members, we're here to support the goals of the district. And I would love to get creative and maybe talk to you about like what are some of those activities that, and I'm speaking only for me, but if you guys want to jump on this, like as a board member, what are the things that I can do that can really help shine a light on what are the needs of our district as it relates to special education? I've attended one of the parent meetings. I found it extremely insightful. I want to attend more of them, but I feel like there's probably more that I can be doing to really get a sense for what that means here at Springford.
Sure. Thank you.
Other board comment? Mrs. Zakowski?
Yeah, I have a couple of things. Thanks for doing that very intensively long report. Must have spent a lot of time. If that's the outcome, I can't imagine the hours that you spent on it. Couple of questions. So let's go back to the PSSA presentation for a minute. And I got what Mrs. Gardy was putting out there, that no, there was an impact, obviously, with COVID, but that we still had ranked above the state average scores, which I would expect nothing less from Springford, right? But that there were drops, there were dips, and I'm sure a large portion of that data was considered in your report, as you mentioned earlier. But with that, the information that we saw, the data that we saw before, was really about the state average, not really the schools in our local area and how we compared to those schools. And also, we really did see the proficient scores, maybe I think some of the advanced scores, but I don't recall seeing a lot of the average or the insufficient or lower scores. So how does that, do those numbers all factor in then to this 71% and the 6 buildings not making it, not getting there? Is that
It does.
when you look at the whole picture of it?
What this particular data, this one single data point, is referring to the Future Ready PA Index. And within the Future Ready PA Index, it's reported out by each individual building. And within the building, they also compare to what's called a 2030 PA goal or target that we should be working toward. And as long as we're meeting benchmarks, and this is again, all buildings across the state, as long as you're meeting benchmarks toward meeting that goal, then you're reported as making progress. So I think what's important is that, yes, we are making progress. Yes, we are high performing, but when we peel back a little bit, we can see that math is stepping out a little bit as a higher need than some of our other areas. So really being able to focus on that, being a little bit more intentional. It's in no way to say that we are failing in math, that we are still doing great. We're still doing well as a district. But when peeling it back, this is the area that we can really target, I think, and that we can improve and bolster. And then you're also looking at your higher level math, making sure that students are successful going into higher level math. It's not just all about the PSSAs, but it's about helping build that math confidence. One of the things that it's a pet peeve of mine is saying, like, I'm not a math person. We want to break that mindset, because most people will never say I'm not a reading person, but somehow we've made it okay for that to be okay with math. And that's a generalization, but the goal is to really say, yeah, we can do a little bit better with math. Let's see how our curriculum documents can be strengthened and improved to help ensure that all kids are getting access to that strong curriculum ahead of time, and that we have then the interventions if students do struggle. So we can see an increase in math success. We also know that there's a lot of connection between Algebra 1 success and then moving beyond that as well. So we want to be able to ensure that our students are meeting that success along the way.
That's a great answer. I like that answer a lot. And
And also in response to that, the more in-depth data where we do the comparisons with the other districts is usually November, I believe. And so what you saw was not the whole report. That would be November, and it had been put off that because of the the delay in the data that had come through. So we'll see more of that.
I understand that, but typically in the past, we've had discussions where that information was shared with us when the PSSA information was shared. So that's why I was.
And last
asking
year,
about
it was
that.
hard to compare that data because there were so many factors that influenced the data. We had, not as many students testing, again, across the state. So there's so much that impacted that data. I am curious to do that and look at it again this year to do that comparison, and hopefully our scores will come back at a reasonable time this year that we can then do that data.
Well, if
typically in
you're
November.
doing all this other tracking and all this other assessment, I would think you would be able to see if there was a trend of those rebounding.
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, so we'll be looking to see that too, because I do think one of the things that Mrs. Gardy had emphasized was that, or the message I picked up was that, was this even reliable and valid data? And there's, I think, a big question around that. So we're going to have to see where we are this year.
Absolutely.
Okay, so then I had another question for Dr. G about the least restrictive environment and inclusion. It's been my experience from what I've heard, just from presentations here and from parents who are happy with the services their child is receiving, that's already happening. So if that's, and I think you alluded to that in many ways this is already happening, how are we going to take that to the next level? Is there a plan around that yet to get there?
Yes and no. So you're
Okay.
right on the first part. We're more successful at the secondary level because we're fortunate enough to have the co-teaching model from 7th grade on. So many of our students are in general education because they're in a setting with a co-teacher who is special ed certified. At the elementary level, that's where we have some work to do with regard to having students in general education more than 80% of the day with the supports embedded into the general ed setting. That's difficult when you have one elementary building and you may only have 3 special education teachers, K-4, and some of them need to have pull-out instruction, reasonably so, because of their reading levels, while others can probably go into general education successfully, but need some sort of support. So there is work to do. And building that plan is, what we're doing. We're trying to bolster supports within the elementary level so that we can have more students in gen ed, general education, with some form of supports, whether it's an instructional assistant or a special education teacher. That's why we're getting more of the instructional assistants targeted training in those areas of reading and math.
I guess it's good that you're here too, then, because you can oversee that and make all that happen for us. So thank you.
Is anyone else at the table who would like to make comment?
I would like to thank you for your presentation, and I personally think as a student, it covers like a lot of things about representing our school community, which I think is really valuable in these changing times. And specifically, I really like the mission statement because I think it's really reflective of how far we've come and something that gives us like a tangible goal to work on, something that like the students can reflect on, because ultimately when we go to our higher level education, just something that we can reflect upon and work towards at our time during spring board. So thank you once again.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for that presentation.